Everybody get to the polls because we're talking about elections on this episode of Beyond the Borderline with your hosts, Connor, Kev, Phil, and Ryan.
Beautiful. All right. Welcome back, everybody. we just had a hilarious conversation, so I'm laughing. But
I'm an idiot, guys. I had a dumb blonde moment.
It was bad. Good thing we're going to scrap the audio from last episode. But anyway, that's besides the point. And we're here with a fresh new episode 29. And we will be talking about did I say about? Talking about the political system in Canada and critiquing it a little bit. And yeah, trying to point out some of its flaws as it relates to, democratic deficit and whatnot. So basically, yeah, I want to hit you guys with some facts, some factual evidence here. And then we can see what that says about Canada. So as you all know, obviously, Justin Trudeau is our prime minister right now. He's the leader of the Liberal Party. The Liberals command a minority government in Parliament, which has been the case since the election of 2019. So contrary to what you might think, however, in both 2019 and 2021, the fall election, the Conservative Party of Canada won the popular vote. However, it was the Liberals who formed government, obviously because they won more seats. So what does that say to Canada about you? Is that fair, for one thing? What does that speak to about representation as, an ideal and the way that our system is actually divided up? Do you think that we should be going off popular vote maybe, or do the seats need to be reapportioned, or what? Because on the face of it, it doesn't seem fair, right? You say, oh, well, this party got more votes. They got a higher percentage of the vote. Shouldn't they be forming government? Well, we got the shit end of the stick. So I don't know. We'll open up the floor and tell me what you think.
So for me, the common argument I hear about going away from Canada, as Canada operates in a first past the post system. If we went away with that and we just went purely, majority rules, majority vote wins, the common argument is, well, what if the population for the next 20, 30 years consistently votes and let's say the largest population centers like Ontario and Quebec consistently vote Conservative or consistently vote Liberal, and they're going to dominate the vote for the rest of the year? Well, I mean, yeah, that's majority rules. If the majority of the Canadian population says, let's vote this way, then that's, in my opinion, that's the government that should rule. If you don't like it, well, then that's democracy in its purest form, majority rule, right?
Here's the issue with that, though, Ryan, is these, like, you're supposed to vote for the person you want to represent your area. So, obviously, I believe, the popular vote should correspond to who has leadership over the country. But at the same time, people vote for the representative they want to represent their area. So how do you, mesh those two together? Because, the popular vote is different from who you might want to be in charge. If you have an idiot in one party and someone who you respect and you want to be the representative for your area, do you segregate that, or how does that work?
Well, I completely agree that representation is a key factor to having a functioning, liberal democracy. Because at the end of the day, if you're not able to vote for someone that shares your values and represents, the freedoms and liberties that you want to uphold in your country, then of course you don't have an efficient democracy. However, we are supposedly operating under a representative form of government, and we are continuously seeing Justin Trudeau lead since 2015, and yet more often than not, whenever you ask someone in Canada about their opinions about Justin Trudeau, it's not in a positive light. So clearly there's some sort of disconnect that's happening here.
Well, so it's like the Liberals have always, and as far as I can tell, for the foreseeable future, will always control the metropolitan centers. They do have something going for them, which is their historical position as kind of the center party of Canada. And they view themselves as the natural governing party of Canada. Of course, I think that's a load of baloney, but there's still that perception. Like, so Ryan and I worked on the last federal election, for example, in the GTA, and you would knock on people's doors, and there's a lot of the time it was, older, well-to-do people who you could tell them everything in the world bad about Justin Trudeau, but they don't care. They're a Liberal Party supporter. They have been, and they always will be. And so the party still, even though Trudeau has tarnished it greatly, still relies on a lot of, it has a good brand in some sense in a lot of circles in Canada. And they do a really good job marketing themselves to immigrants, even though I don't think they particularly care one way or another more than another party, for example, about immigrants. They make it seem as if they do. And so this allows them to take control of the metropolitan areas extremely easily. And so what that means is that's more people and that's more ridings, right? So it's really interesting. Like I said, the Conservatives won the popular vote in this past fall. They won 33.74% of the vote, or 5.74 million votes, compared to the Liberals' 32.6. So again, not a huge difference, but over 1%, and that amounted to about 200,000 votes. But the seat difference, the corresponding seat difference, is pretty astounding. The Liberals with 160 and the Conservatives with 119.
Yeah, that's
a
ridiculous.
41 seat swing based on a Conservative 1% lead in the popular vote. That's Toronto, that's Vancouver, that's Montreal, and that's Ottawa. I mean,
yeah. But the explanation for that is, and it goes into my earlier point about how the representation in our current electoral system is not actually representative, because most people I speak to, especially after the federal election, I ask, "Oh, why? Well, who'd you vote for?" And they go, "Oh, I voted Liberal." And then I'll ask, "But don't you hate Justin Trudeau?" "Yeah, I hate Justin Trudeau, but I like my MP." Well, this just goes to show that voting for your MP doesn't mean shit, because at the end of the day, we still have a horrible prime minister. I don't, at the end of the day, I really don't care how much you like your MP, because it at this point, it just appears to be a facade, voting for your MP, because we still have a horrible government and a horrible leader.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest problems in Canada is party, what would you say? Like towing the party line is incredibly important. And why is the word escaping me? Let's just say cohesion among party members, where they unify behind the leader, is extremely strong. So you'll rarely find any dissent among the caucus of any given party, which is why it was so astounding, really, that there were 4 MPs that came out a couple months ago
anonymously.
Against, well, a couple did publicly, against Justin Trudeau for his use of the Emergencies Act. But that's a really big problem, because it does take away from that, right? Like, people say exactly what you said. Yeah, I voted for my MP. It doesn't really matter to me who the leader is. I voted for my local representative. Well, okay, that's all fine and good. Your local representative might be the best person on earth compared to the leader, who's a horrible person, but it doesn't matter, because they're probably, unless they're a cabinet member, they have very little say. Maybe behind closed doors they might have a bit more sway, but publicly, I mean, it's the leader of the party runs the party with what amounts to an iron fist in Canada.
And what people have to understand about, even if your local MP is a cabinet minister, it's still federal politics. It's still federal elections. So they don't actually have as much to do with you on an individual level in your province as your MPP does, or your MLA.
Yeah, which is why actually I think people should be a lot more focused on municipal elections than they are.
Municipal and provincial elections. Like, let's take an example for Ottawa. Mayor Jim Watson, who has gone uncontested for his last, few terms, and he's now finally stepping down. He's not running for election next election. So that will be something to watch out for. Like, for those who live in Ottawa, like, really pay attention who you want your next mayor to be.
And councillors. The only thing is, with the cities, the unions hold a tremendous amount of power, and they basically pick and choose who gets to sit on the city council.
I was also going to say a big part of like voting is unfortunately these unions and big organizations often tell people who to vote for,
Yeah, exactly.
which is, you know, like you can say, oh, that's, you know, collusion or whatever. And people are supposed to be like, obviously people make the choices for themselves because, you know, people can't see who you vote for. But at the same time, when you're getting like not forced, but when people are shoving one view and down your throat all the time, it's hard to be like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Or you can't really openly say, especially like in unions and big organizations, you can't say I'm going against that and I'm voting XYZ instead.
Yeah, you act as a community.
Another part of the problem is just the level of corruption that has occurred in Canada at the federal level over almost 10 years now, because since 2015, so not quite 10 years, 7 years, is pretty astounding. And it just goes to show that, you know, someone like Justin Trudeau has really been able to do whatever he wants, for lack of a better word, because there's very little accountability in our Canadian system. You know, to give an example, if we want to go back to 2017 to the, or not 2017, it was when Justin Trudeau used government funds to go on a $200,000 vacation. There is a law in Canada that stipulates that if the prime minister gives himself, like writes himself a letter and gives himself permission to take that government money, then there's no offense caused.
Yeah,
like that just sounds completely backwards to me. Like, how is that okay?
Yeah, no, it's garbage. I mean, if you were a good person, you would hope that you wouldn't take advantage of stuff like that. But yeah, so okay, so it's interesting. Okay, so as someone who favors the Conservatives, let's say, although I like to imagine I'm not partisan to the Conservative Party, let's say.
You believe in conservative ideals.
Yeah. So it kind of upsets me that, you know, we win these last two elections in terms of popular vote, but aren't able to form government. However, I have to be careful not to be a hypocrite, because, you know, in the United States, the last two Republican presidents, Donald Trump and George W. Bush, have only become president because of the Electoral College. They've both actually lost the popular vote in 2000 and in 2016. And yet they won via the Electoral College and became president. So you know, so then I say, well, okay, I'm not too upset about that. You know, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, not huge fans of them. So it's hard not to be a hypocrite. So as far as I can tell, though, the Electoral College in the United States actually has merits in terms of allowing, not allowing, let's say, New York and LA to determine every single federal election, right? Which would be, well, so you talked about it earlier, Ryan, about pure democracy being majority wins. But the United States, in its founding, the founding fathers, or at least some of them, were specifically concerned with that, with mob rule. Like, majority rules is just mob rule.
Right. And yeah,
so
it comes with its own pitfalls, I'm aware.
Yeah, so it's like the 51%. The founders of the United States strove hard to make sure that the 51% couldn't take away the rights of the 49%. You know what I mean? Because they imagined all these scenarios, right, which connects to what we mentioned a couple episodes ago about the Second Amendment. But they set up their country in a number of ways so as to, if any number of catastrophic tyrannical scenarios were to happen, they would want it prevented. And the Electoral College would be one of those. And so, you know, when the Electoral College serves us well, it's like, yay, let's go. And then in Canada, when the opposite happens, it's like shit. But I'm just trying to decipher this in my head, because, like I said, the Electoral College, being
Doesn't
that
it, like,
gives a voice to smaller states and stuff like that,
So
seems to be a good thing for democracy. Whereas in
this
Canada, our system doesn't actually prevent the metropolises from deciding the elections because they have more seats,
Right.
because we're a parliamentary system. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
In the States, I have a question. Maybe I'm off base here with the question, but isn't it like in the States, the representative for each state picks, like for the state who they want as leader? Like they can
The
flip,
quote
right?
unquote electors can, for the electors to like. So okay, so it must be said, the electors almost always go with the popular vote of the state. You know what I mean?
But almost, you just said almost, right? Like they can go against, right? Or
They
can't
can,
go.
but it would basically amount to a constitutional crisis, and it never happens.
Mhm.
But the thing about the US is it's 50 separate elections for president, right? In each state.
Mhm.
But what it means in terms of electors is that it's kind of a mix, right? So states are apportioned different number of electors in the Electoral College. It is still based on size. So Texas and California and New York and Florida have a lot, but it's not purely based on population as it would be with a pure popular vote, let's say across the entire United States. It's skewed to let the smaller states like Rhode Island or Montana, smaller, I mean, in terms of population, or Kansas, to have more of a say than they otherwise would have because of that principle that I mentioned before of being against mob rule. And so even though I think California, for example, has 36 electoral votes out of how many is it? 375, something like that. They should have more based on their population, right? But they don't. But so it's a good balancing act. So the electors still go by that state's popular vote. So let's say Alabama votes 70% for Donald Trump in 2016. The Alabama electors, maybe there's probably around 10 or 8 or something for the size of Alabama, would vote in the quote unquote Electoral College for Donald Trump, all 8 of them, 10 of them, whatever. And then you add up the votes in the Electoral College to find out who becomes president. So,
my understanding of the American electorate system is lacking for sure. I don't know nearly as much as I do about Canada, but already I'm hearing how what you've explained, Cam. Already I'm hearing how much better it is in Canada, because this is inherently wrong with parliamentary systems, and it became so evident after the deal that the Liberal and the NDP party struck. For the past 2 elections, as we previously stated, the Liberal Party lost the popular vote, and in this government and in this last election, they formed a minority government.
Right.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, in a minority government, you didn't amass enough seats in Parliament so that whenever you want to pass a bill as a ruling government, it's much harder to do so now because you have less power in the House. In theory, that's a good thing, right? Because if the people only voted that government in for a minority government, it means there's not enough people that in Canada have confidence enough for that government to rule fully. In theory, that sounds great, right? But the problem we're now seeing is even in a minority government, when you have the Liberal and NDP party now basically coalescing together in a pseudo coalition, the Liberal Party now essentially has a majority government, which regardless of whether or not you combine the two popular votes together for the Liberal and NDP party, you might think, oh, well, now they have the popular vote. Well, that's not exactly 100% representative. Guaranteed, Liberal voters voted Liberal because they voted Liberal. They didn't vote if they wanted an NDP government in, they would have voted an NDP government in, right?
Yeah.
So now you have this problem where the Liberal government essentially has a majority government because all those seats that the NDPs have added on top of the Liberal seats that the Liberals already have gives them way more seats than the Conservative Party has. So there really isn't any government to criticize and fight back against things that the majority of Canadians wouldn't want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless the Bloc join the Conservatives, which is never going to happen. But
no, it's never going to happen.
It's a very interesting, it's a problem with representation, right? Like, so many problems with democracy is how you define certain things, or what does democracy mean to you? What does representation mean to you? So on one side of the coin, they could say, well, we've banded together and we represent 48% in terms of popular vote of the Canadian electorate.
But but like I said,
we
that's not accurate.
No, yeah, well, but that's an argument to be made. Is it a good argument? Not necessarily. But then you can come back and say, well, hold on. No, Liberal minority government under Justin Trudeau, you were given a minority mandate. You only received X amount of share of the vote, which was Canadians telling you clearly to your face they do not have confidence in you having a majority. So there's no mandate for you to have the powers of a majority government. So then to go behind Canadians' backs and strike this deal, basically giving them a majority government, is contrary to the will of the people, even though they can say, well, on paper, we command 48% of the popular vote.
But that's another problem with minority majority governments, right? Because let's take a look at Stephen Harper here. Stephen Harper, I think we can all agree, was a pretty good prime minister. But when he got voted in with a minority government, not because he wasn't a good prime minister, but because there's so many people out there that need a flashy prime minister that looks beautiful and has great hair and makes me feel good. Stephen Harper got a minority government because he doesn't fill those boxes. Well, that's also a problem with our system, because now you're penalizing.
I like his helmet head.
You're penalizing an effective, politician, effective prime minister, because you don't like the way he looks or because you don't like some of the things that he said. Let's take a look at the numbers. Canada's deficit and budget was balanced.
Yeah, and that goes into another issue, which is like the people don't either know or care enough to vote.
Just let me finish this last thing. I'm of the opinion, if Stephen Harper had remained in office past 2015, we would be in a much better situation economically in Canada right now. Guaranteed.
Economically, yeah, for sure.
Guaranteed.
Connor, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, I mean, I agree with a lot of things, but at the same time, like the NDP and Liberals striking this deal, like you have to understand, they're not just going to let everything go that the Liberals want to let go. It's like they're going to come to a compromise, and the people that did vote for NDP and did vote for the Liberals are going to get some of the things that they wanted to happen. So,
right, which is
in order for NDP to say, yeah, okay, we'll let this go, Liberal government, you have to give something to us first. And so, I understand, like, they're both, NDP is very left wing. So there's going to be a lot more spending than what people do. And a lot of people that maybe don't understand economics or GDP and all that good stuff are happy with what's going on and what's happening, because it's like a lot of these social issues can be resolved, but it's like, what is people don't look at, like, what are the effects, what's the detriment to this, like who's going to be paying for it? Because at the end of the day, I think that's a big thing that maybe people on the right side or in the center side are like, well, is it worth me? Because that's what happens at the end of the day, is like the citizens are the ones that pay for all this stuff to happen. So it's like, is it worth me paying for this to happen? But I understand. I don't necessarily disagree with that kind of pact or whatever you want to say. And I think that's the whole point of a minority government, is like, people, like, you got to make deals with the other side in order to pass the most important things that you want to pass through.
Right.
Is you got to make these compromises, say, hey, if you guys let this go through, we'll let that go through, or we'll pass this bill for you.
Right, but those two parties that are trying to pass things now they're going to try to pass things that no Canadian, or at least the majority of Canadians, voted against. That's the issue.
But that's the thing, right? Though, like that's why I was trying to contrast. It's like two sides of a coin, like yes and no, because like Connor said, the people that voted for the NDP are happy right now. Maybe they're not happy because, Jagmeet Singh sold out the identity of the NDP to basically be a lapdog for Justin Trudeau, but they're happy in the sense that they'll get some consolation prize in various bills that are going to go through. And so that's a conundrum. Like, it really is, in terms of pure democracy, again, aiming at the ideal. Is that right? Because they're bringing more people into the fold, and there's now technically the governing coalition, even though it's not a coalition formally, represents a greater share of the Canadian population than the government otherwise would have, so it's a strong argument. I still think it's underhanded and, a little slimy, and it's not what the Trudeau government was mandated to do. But is it unprecedented? No. And is there no good argument in favor of it from a democratic standpoint? No. So yeah, it's really interesting. Like, because again, it goes to what is your idea of democracy? Like the founding fathers, their idea of democracy was protect against mob rule. And so the Electoral College and other instruments built into the US system subvert pure democracy for the sake of better governance and longevity and stability. It's really cool.
And I'm glad you brought up, the founding fathers, trying to fight against mob rule, because there are a lot of people see democracy as this pillar of divinity and the absolute best form of government. But like I've mentioned in previous episodes, democracy in and of itself, if you go back to the original form of democracy, this is a criticism by Immanuel Kant for you philosophers out there. Democracy is a form of aggressive rule. The majority rule get to decide and impart their choices on the rest of the population.
Exactly.
So when you don't have these stipulations in place, like preventing mob rule with the electoral colleges and, having a constitution that sets, specific inalienable rights so that when a government, gets in, they can't just up and change things. These are the things that are absolutely essential to ensure that your quote unquote democracy functions in a manner that won't allow the cabals of the few to rise up and try and mob rule. And the populism gets thrown in there a lot as something bad, but it's not inherently bad. But you can't, for a democracy to be effective, and I think the United States has proven that their democracy is at least slightly more effective than Canada, is you have to protect the dissenting minority every time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Canada tries to do that in a couple ways. Like, again, there's two sides to the coin. Like, you could say, you could say that a parliamentary system tries to cater to minorities as well by at least giving political minorities a voice in the House. Whereas the United States, you're either forced to choose between two parties or don't vote, or, some random independent. And, there are some, part of our Constitution is, which makes it a lot different than the United States, is that we actually enshrine group rights, like minority group rights, whether that be Aboriginal or the French language or whatever, which doesn't seem like it's a big distinction, but from a legal standpoint, that's a huge distinction. Whereas the United States, everyone's seen to be on a legal, even playing field. But in Canada, we specifically recognize, enshrine, and seek to protect minorities specifically in our constitutional law. So, you could say, well, that's a good thing. I tend towards viewing that as, divisive and going into the group identity theories. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see how different democracies like try to aim at democracy, like, aiming at the good, that idea, just replacing it with. Yeah,
this is brought up another issue, and this is largely due to civic engagement in Canada's population, because we do have a small population in comparison to our landmass.
Yeah,
to be honest, we have a small population just in general for an entire country. But if you look at statistics on elections.ca, you'll see in the past two elections, voter turnout has reduced anywhere between 1% and 5% to now in the latest election, only 63% of eligible Canadians who can vote voted. Now you might think 63%, oh, well, that's still the majority of Canadians. That's not that bad. Well, I mean, it's steadily dropping 1% to 5% every year, which means civic engagement in Canada is dropping. And the only way democracy works is if civic engagement stays high. However, governments like the Liberal Party thrive on low civic engagement because it's easier for them to exercise and dictate what they want to do. It's just another problem specifically that I've noticed in Canada, where so it doesn't happen as much in the United States. Maybe that's just because the United States people are more civically involved, or maybe their electoral college system is just that much better.
They're 100% more civically involved, definitely. The United States, like, everyone is so much more politically conscious there, and they actually have, like, well, Yeah, I mean, we could go into the differences, but they
Well,
have.
believe it or not, folks, it's actually easier to get things done politically in Canada in Canada in comparison to the United States. It's just you have to get maybe 10 to 30 people and you can completely take over your riding if you really want to. It's not that hard in Canada.
But the United States is designed to be slow. It's designed to be gradual change. It's designed to be, no
Right. I think
no
the only
one is
reason it's
able
fast
to
in Canada,
amass
right?
power.
I think the only reason it's fast in Canada right now is just due to that low of civic engagement, right? Like, I remember working on the federal election camp, how many people didn't know there was a difference between the PC party and the CPC party? They all thought it was just the same party. People really don't know in Canada the difference between provincial and federal politics.
I think
Yeah.
it starts.
People
it
just
all
don't care.
starts in our educational system. You learn civics for 3 months of 1 year of school.
Mhm.
They don't teach it outside of that, and I think that's a big thing. And also, they don't focus on each party's, like let kids and let let everyone, let adults, let kids, everyone have all the information they can, and you know be able to understand it and make decisions on themselves rather than teach one specific philosophy or whatever. Just be like, spend a whole year research, like 3 or 4, like, because there's so many different parties in Canada. But I mean, obviously there's like 4 that are 3, I'd say 3 that are the main focus, and maybe 4 or 5 that are secondary. But take some time and let people read and understand, and then that way as they grow and evolve, they can learn more from opposing views and stuff like that too. Like, who is it? It was like Winston Churchill has like so many quotes about it. Like, people throughout different stages in their life are going to believe in different philosophies and different political system or political parties and stuff like that.
Are you alluding to the quote about where he says basically like was it him that said that,
He's like,
you basically you grow up and you're conservative?
yeah, he's like, if you are a teenager and you're not liberal, you're heartless.
Right,
If you're
right.
not center when you're a young adult, I forgot what the middle one was, and then the last one was like, when you're an adult, if you're not conservative, then you're brainless.
Yeah.
Well, that just goes hand in hand with the fact that most well-off children get a sense of entitlement, right? And it isn't until they start living on their own, paying their own bills, and having to work for their own money that they start to realize, oh, things are different.
Yeah, well, young people are just inherently idealistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I want my children to dream of what could be, as long as they're not willing to burn the world down to get there, then
Right.
then I'm fine with,
I think that
I
goes
want to
back
hear
the whole-
ideas. Like, we need to hear ideas from people and from young people.
That goes back to the whole like NDP liberal, like, as you guys want to call it, coalition, but I just call it like their
pseudo coalition is what I call it, because it's not actually a coalition.
Yeah, but like essentially
I call it a
is,
circle
like,
jerk.
It's like what it's what life is though. Like, life is just full of making compromises to what no one is ever going to fully get what they want.
Well, I wouldn't see that. I wouldn't see this as a compromise. I would see this as a tactful move on the part of the Liberal Party.
Yeah, but it's like when they pass these bills and stuff like that, there's going to be compromise, and is everyone's point of view going to get input? No, but the ones that they made this deal with, the NDP are going to say, hey, you want to do this? No, you're going to have to compromise on this for us to let this go or whatever. And that's kind of what life is, if you want to get something done, you're going to have to compromise with others to make sure what you want to get done gets done.
But that's true. I mean, that does happen still in other systems in the US Congress and whatnot, but no, it's valid point. Okay, Phil, you haven't said much, so we have got 2 minutes left. So pressure's on you now to come up with one last thing to say. Last great thing to say.
I was actually saving my energy for our next episode on Friday.
Okay.
But essentially what I was thinking of this whole time was, why on earth are we quantifying both the popular vote and who actually wins the election? Like, why are we quantifying both if they're going to be different of each other? I just found that interesting. Like
Right,
why?
right.
Yeah, it's
why
almost like
why
an
even
unnecessary
bother?
statistic.
Why bother? Why upset
Yeah.
half of the population? Why do that?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, you
That's
have
the
to
dumbest
know.
thing ever. You
Yeah,
have to know,
I get
but
I
do
get
you
what you're
have to
saying,
know?
Phil.
You know,
Maybe they
like,
just shouldn't. It's not that they should try and stifle it, but maybe they shouldn't broadcast it as much because in the past 2 elections, we can see it's just gonna piss people off.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
but
I think
data
it's
is
an thing.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
important
saying you
for
shouldn't have
people-
access to the data.
basically,
It's
I
an
wanted to
important
leave
thing
us.
for people to know, though, because that
Yeah.
way I think it helps leaders understand where their people are looking at too.
I don't think
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau gives a flying
That was
fuck.
actually a ploy. I was saving my energy for some spicy stuff next episode. So
Okay. Oh, I hope
Stay
you have
tuned for
ideas
that.
then. Okay, cool, cool.
stay tuned for
All
that.
right. It's getting spicy next episode.
All right, stay tuned for the rest of this, the rest of Phil's thoughts and opinions next episode. In the meantime, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and take care. Brush your hair.